Good evening. Welcome everybody. My name is Peter Rehberg. I'm head of collections at Schules Museum here in Berlin and one of the two curators of the show Intimacy, New Queer Art from Berlin and Beyond. Before I tell you a few things about the project, about the way we work here, about the artworks in particular, of course, I want to thank a few people because, as you can imagine, putting up an exhibition is a group work. No one person alone can do that. And there's a couple of people I want to thank, particularly before we walk through the show. First of all, the team of Schules Museum, including the building team, our board, and also particularly my co-curator, Apostolos Lampropoulos, who cannot be here today. Unfortunately, our project manager, Karina Klukbauer, our production manager, Justus Heitzelmann, and our scenographer, Diogo Passarinho, Reiter and Daniel Sander from the press team, who are here with me tonight, making this event possible, this live show from the Schules Museum, and also Maya, our technical support. This tour today will be in English. We will, however, produce a version with German subtitles, which is available on our Facebook site next week or the week after. We're going to be working on this. And of course, once we're open again, our wonderful guides will also give you opportunities to lead you through this tour, either in German or in English. A couple of announcements before we start walking around here. I will say a couple of things, make a few remarks about every artwork that's presented here. With some of the artists, we also already produced interviews. And if you go to our Facebook site, you can check them out. And there will be more of those interviews that talk a little bit in depth about the artworks over the next couple of weeks. Additionally, we will also have a public program, and this kicks off on February 11th with a talk by Susanna Parsonon. It will be followed by a talk of Jean-Luc Nancy and Tim Dean in March and April. This is a cooperation with Zentrum für Literatur und Kulturforschung and ICI Berlin. Go on their websites or ours to get more information. Okay, and also, you know, since Corona has made working on this project much more difficult, we were supposed to be opening in November. That's the bad news. We cannot open now. However, the good news is we will be able to extend the exhibition until the end of summer, until end of August. So if you are in Berlin or if you travel to Berlin in the summer when this is possible again, you will still have a chance to see our show here. When I was writing the proposal for Intimacy, New Queer Art from Berlin and Beyond in 2019, I had no idea that a pandemic like this would hit us. And when we developed the ideas further, we couldn't know how relevant, how significant the question of intimacy will become precisely in these times. So even though some of these artworks also display a relationship to illness or even to crisis and even to death, they are produced before COVID. So they are also a kind of reminder of the times before COVID, how life was like before COVID. And they also, I think, present a certain kind of vision of what will happen again. So they give us an idea of intimacies to come, of parties to come. And in this sense, this exhibition is for me also a form of queer empowerment. Let me say a couple of things about the concept of intimacy before we start with the artworks themselves. Intimacy is an interesting, one might even say, a queer notion. Yeah? It's a coming together, a form of togetherness of bodies, two or more, through touch, affection, sex, language. All of this can create intimacy. And while intimacy is sometimes thought of as a kind of place to go back to, coming home and belonging, we don't want to just think about intimacy in these terms of reconciliation or harmony. We also think that bodies that come together are a form of experiment, and that there can something new, experimental, and even transformative about intimacy. So yes, maybe just as a couple of keywords to think about when we walk through these rooms. And of course, there's also something specific about queer intimacy, because for queer people, the question of public and private, the distinction of public and private is so crucial. One might even say what distinguishes us from other minorities is the fact that we cannot display our intimacies in the same way, with the same freedom that other people have, which is not just a reason to be mourning or to be sad, but it's also a starting point to rethink intimacy and to develop new forms of intimacy. And as we know, this is precisely what queer people have been doing by redefining the public space, by creating new forms of being together. All right, so we have about 30 positions here. There's photography, there's paintings, sound installation, video installation, sculptures. So it's very multimedia, and the show is divided into 4 sections. The first one is called Look at Us. So it's about the question of the gaze and the glance. And just briefly to throw out one idea here is, my friend Apostolos makes this distinction between intimacy and privacy. Well, privacy is really behind closed doors. You're shut off from the gaze, from the public. You don't know what's going on. Intimacy, it's different. It's a form of proximity that is recorded, or that is written about, or that is experienced, or even witnessed. And if you have a look at the architecture here in this room, the beautiful architecture that Diogo produced for us, we created these little gaps and spaces where you sometimes can see things but not quite, or only get a glimpse at something. So that was an attempt at bringing this idea of intimacy as a form of looking at something, of witnessing into the space. The first artist and the first group of artists I want to talk about is Paul Sipuya, and that's a photograph by Paul Sipuya that we see here to my left. Paul Sipuya has worked together with a couple of friends and colleagues. That's part of his project, a form of collective work, amongst them Clifford Prince King, Derek Woods Morrow, and Emerson Richard, and we will see their work in a second. Paul Sipuya is an African-American queer artist from New York. He's working at the intersection of sexuality, race, and gender, and particularly this project, his project, and also the collective project of him and his friends, is a meditation about, say, the position of the black male body. And as we know, the black male body, particularly in gay culture, has a difficult position in that it's been objectified, exoticized, turned into a fetish, etc., etc. So the project of Sipuya and his friends is to change this structure, to change this, say, dispositive of the white guy looking at the black guy. Here we have different strategies of how the black guy looks back, or how the black guy takes the picture. And if we go here to the next room, and you will see the pieces by Clifford Prince King here to my left, and here Derek Woods Morrow, and over there we can move there in a second, Emerson Richard, you perhaps get an idea of what I'm talking about. So each time we have a kind of self-reflective situation. The very fact of taking a picture is the motive here, and we see men, in this case he's mostly taking pictures of gay men, but also of women and of trans people and of all of his friends. So there's a self-reflective moment, what it means to create a picture, to work on these pictures, and to create a visual language that breaks with the violence of objectifying the black male body. And if we go over to this side, this is a picture taken by Emerson Ricks, and we see here actually Paul Sipuya himself in this picture. All right, so this is our first room of Look at Us, and we also have a couple of zines lying here on the table. I also was interested in displaying different forms of mediality, and one might say that the zine itself is not just a place where certain aesthetics are being shown that are sometimes similar to the artworks we are presenting, but that the zine itself is also, one might say, an intimate medium. Yeah? To be alone with a zine sitting in a room, have a relationship to the text and to the pictures. Here to my right, we have a video produced by John Paul Rico from Canada, and this takes up again the topic of Paul Sipuya's work. Jean Paul Rico created a video essay on Barry Jenkins' Oscar film Moonlight from 2017, and maybe you remember there is a friendship between these two black gay guys at the core of the story. They never come out to each other. They never call themselves gay. So this is not gayness as a form of identity or a political program. Nonetheless, a lot is going on between these guys, for example, in this one scene on the beach. And Rico is interested in these forms of connecting to each other, touch, talking, sitting there by the ocean in proximity to each other, and explores the potential of these kinds of intimacies that are beyond or before, say, identity. Okay, you can come with me to the next room. I've already addressed the question of mediality and how, you know, our relationship to media has a lot to do with intimacy. This is also depicted in the work of Sholem Kristaika. We see here a painting by Sholem. Maybe we make a little tour around the column to get an idea of the spectrum of the diversity of his work, starting here with this beautiful painting with a guy in bed with a smartphone. Here on the back side of the column, we have two guys in bed, a scene of drinking, of sharing drinks, of getting drunk or maybe wasted together. And eventually here on the wall, we have a guy, also a very typical Berlin scene, one might say, two guys sitting next to each other in a very typical, maybe Neukölln courtyard, in the sun, maybe in the spring. It's still cold, but a clear sky. So these are different moments of male-male intimacy in the work of Sholem Kristaika, which is very much a documentation about queer life now in Berlin. And as I said, there is a connection here. We have the guy with a cell phone also to the zines and to the question of mediality. So, you know, again, especially in times of Corona, a lot of intimate moments are created through mobile devices, which are sort of an extension of our bodies. And sometimes in these times, the only way we can get in touch with the outside world or with other people. Sholem is a chronist of contemporary queer Berlin. One might also say, and I mean this in a very positive, nice sense, of hipster Berlin. And someone who is documenting that lifestyle is also the Greek artist Spiros Rent, who lives in Berlin and is giving us these intimate moments of party life, or maybe sometimes private parties, public parties, sex parties, taking place in public or private spaces, mostly involving more than two people. So Spiros' work is, in my mind, also very much about the question of polyamory, about having effective relationships, of experiencing intimacy with more than one person. Let's move over here to this wall and have a look at we are back. Okay, sorry. I think we just had a little moment of break. We had a technical problem here, but I think it's already resolved. I'm not sure when I lost you. So we were talking about Sholem, we were talking about Spiros, and now I'm talking about Zanila Moholi, an artist from South Africa. And she is giving us pictures of intimate scenes between women and portraits of queer families in their homes. caressing, embracing, washing themselves, moments before or after sex, maybe. And in my mind, Zanila Moholi's project is also very much a project of visibility, to give representation, in this case, to black lesbian women, and to give them a space, to give them an audience, to provide them a stage, to connect to their feelings. And since this is taking place in South Africa, let's also remind ourselves, intimacy is always something which is, queer intimacy is always something under attack, be it in different parts of the world, be it here in Europe. So again, this is for me also, in a way, the political moment of intimacy. I now want to move over here to a small, beautiful little picture made with wax crayons. And this is a picture by the French artist Abel Boga, who also worked in Berlin part-time. And when I met Abel, I was, first of all, I was impressed by her she has massive paintings, massive colorful paintings with violent, almost cartoonish scenes that are very powerful and strong. This first caught my attention. But then there's a completely other side to Abel's work, which we see here and which we choose to show here in our show, which are really tender and intimate scenes between two women. I said that, for example, in Spiros's work, intimacy is always more than two people, often more than two people. Of course, the couple is, let's just say, an important category when we're talking about intimacy. Here we have it with the two women in Abel Boga's work. We also have it in the pictures here by De la Grace Volcano from the United States, who has been living in Europe for quite some time, and he's really, really one of the legends of queer visual culture, and I'm so happy that we could include their work here in our show. There's photographs portraying trans men, interpeople, lesbian couples, and gay folks. Also, I would say, similar to Zanila Moholi's project, to a politics of visibility. So long before, for example, inter and trans were politically on the agenda, he made them the stars of his visual art. We are also seeing a couple of pictures by De la Grace Volcano in the second room, and hopefully we are also planning on bringing Del here to Berlin and have an artist talk with a hopefully later in the year. A last example where really the idea of the couple is at the fore are these beautiful Polaroids by Slava Mogutin, born in Russia, immigrated to the United States a long time ago. So here we have very colorful, playful pictures of non-binary, lesbian and gay couples. And we might say, yes, on the one hand, this is conventional in terms of displaying the couple. However, there's a playfulness and one might even say a cuteness to these pictures so that you cannot hold it against them. And in a certain sense, they are images of a queer teen romance. So yes, having talked about youth, having talked about the couple, I want to move on to the second section of our exhibition here, which is called Our Bodies in Time. So intimacy is about the ways in which bodies share a certain space, but they're also about temporality, about how long are we together and how old are you. And intimacy is often thought of as a phenomenon of youth, or one might even go that far and say queerness itself is mostly displayed as a form of youth culture. For example, in the pictures of Slava Mogutin. So the question is, what happens if different generation of queer folks come together? What does it mean to get older as a queer person? What about queer bodies that are old, that are sick? What about death? How do queer people relate to death? So all of these questions are at stake in this second section. And we start here with a video by the Greek artist Eva Giannakopoulou, who works primarily in the medium of film and performance. And in this video, this video is called At the Beach. She accompanies a queer family to a beach in Greece. And, you know, we might think of the beach in a certain sense as a gay or queer space. You know, they have been very important for the public visibility of queer people. However, first and foremost, one might say the beach is a very heteronormative space. So what Eva Giannakopoulou is documenting here in this piece is the feeling and the experiences of a trans family on a Greek beach, the kind of comments they get, what they have to live up, what they have to take, how they have to react to these forms of oppression and also violence. Okay, so here we have, I think it's maybe the largest artwork that we have in our show. This is a piece by Victoria Heifetz. Victoria is from Israel but has been living in Berlin for quite some time. And Victoria is very much interested in the question of how to get older as a trans woman. So this is most of the people populating her large artworks are aging trans women. You can see the wrinkles, you can see the details of their eyes. They almost look like they're made out of wood. And Victoria, who will also appear in an interview on our Facebook site in the next couple of weeks. When you talk to her about her art, she says, these pictures that kind of force you almost into a proximity with them. You almost feel like you're forced to look at them. They draw you in, yeah? And for her, that's a way of addressing her anxieties of what it means to be trans and get older, and also to fight, you know, in this very strong way, forceful way, against the invisibility of older trans women and older queer people. So we are still here in the second section, Our Bodies in Time, it's called. And the next piece I want to talk about is by Tomka Weiss and Josh Hoeneß. It's this installation piece here to my right, which was worked on for a couple of years, but this particular version has been produced particularly for our exhibition. Tomka is an artist and a trans activist, and Josh, who sadly passed away in 2019, and whose bequest is actually also in the archive of Schwules Museum, was a queer trans scholar and activist. And their combined artistic and critical research, that's what I would call it. You can see here fragments of bodies, certain lines that form bodies, but also fragments of texts. So, and they are like, you know, on top of each other. So there's layers of them on top of each other. And since it's lit from behind, there's also sometimes just drawings that you can guess, that you don't completely see. In my mind, this work which is also, you know, influenced by Hirschfeld's ideas and readings of Hirschfeld, which were very important for Josh Hoeneß. This is a project about the deconstruction of gender and sexuality binaries, and to show positions and bodies and connections that are beyond heteronormativity and gender normativity, and instead show a different notion of what it means to be human. I want to show you now a piece by the German artist Michaela Milian. Michaela Milian is a visual artist, also a musician. She's also a professor of art in Hamburg. And we show here a sound video installation that Michaela did and that has been displayed, I think, at least not for long, never before in Berlin. It's a big piece, it's an extra room. We will walk inside in a second. This is about two lesbian celebrities. The famous painter, Sarah Schumann, who died in 2019, and the writer Sylvia Bovenschen, her partner, who died in 2017. Bovenschen is, to some of you, maybe known because she wrote one of the canonical feminist texts of the 1970s, die imaginierte Weiblichkeit, the imagined femininity, which was really important in the German tradition. And she also, after her academic life, was a best-selling author, in fact, and wrote a book on aging, fittingly. So we will see here in this little room, we have three screens on Schumann, and the third one, a catalog that they're browsing through while talking about the invisibility of women in the history of Western art.
Ja, das sind Figuren und Modelle. Und hat natürlich, ich projiziere da auch meine eigenen Träume. Ich würde auch gerne so sein. Ja, recht. Aber ich kann das nicht erreichen. Also mal nichts mir. Sich von unten, von oben sehen. Eine Collage 1960.
Okay, so we are out of the black box again. One of the themes here in the section, Our Bodies and Time, is about HIV and AIDS. And by now, there's been already a discourse about the ways in which the HIV/AIDS crisis in the Western world relates to Corona, COVID now. Of course, there's a lot of differences, you know. I mean, gay men and other queer people had to fight for political support in the 1980s. They also had to fight with pharmaceutical companies. So it's politically and also in terms of medical support, a very different situation than the one that we have in 2019. And let's not forget, 40 years after its discovery, we have a very effective treatment of HIV/AIDS, but we have no vaccine 40 years later. We have four pieces that deal with HIV and AIDS. And the first one that you see here to my right is a photograph by Annie Leibovitz, the partner of Susan Sontag. This is a picture taken in Berlin, and it's a picture of Alf Wollt, a German actor and also a man working at the Arsenal cinema in Berlin in the 1980s. The Arsenal is still one of the important art house places still in Berlin today. Today it's located at Potsdamer Platz. Alf was very open about his HIV infection early on. This is a picture of him in the hospital alone, in the hospital bed. And we might say, by the way that he looks back at us, that he doesn't want to be a victim. He refuses to be a victim. So that's also a political position in this historical moment around 1990. The next piece I want to show you is by Marlon Ricks. Marlon Ricks was an African-American gay artist who died of AIDS in 1994, and he's probably best known for his longer film Tongues Untied from 1989. In it, aesthetically, this is really interesting because it's on the one hand, you know, a spoken word film that has a very strong or even aggressive form of poetry, maybe related to rap in a certain sense. And also the editing of the video is quite interesting. Remember, the time around 1990 was also the peak moment of MTV. So this owes a lot to the aesthetics of music television as it was prevalent back then. At the core of his project is the position of black gay men in the United States, the effects that the disastrous effects that US politics have on the black gay male body. And one might say, 25 years later, that the body politics and the form of activism, this is really a call for action, are not that different from what we know now as Black Lives Matter. And now we're going to see a short clip from Marlon Ricks' video.
In America, in America,
So we have two more pieces left here in the first room. We are halfway through, actually more than halfway through, because the second room is much smaller than the first room. And we have two more pieces on HIV/AIDS here to my right. We have these beautiful pencil drawings by Simon Fujiwara, a British artist living in Berlin. These are architectural fragments of Notre Dame in Paris, and you might recognize there's the shape of an alcove inside of the cathedral, in which we usually would have sculptures or paintings of saints. However, these spaces are empty in Fujiwara's version, and instead he gives us these photographs of people with AIDS and the way that they are being taken care of by their friends, their partners, their family in the hospital. So this is a project also about care, and these are documents also from the time around 1990. Some of you might remember and might be reminded of the Benetton campaign around that time, which in a very drastic way displayed the dying body of men with AIDS, but also the care and the company they had in this moment. All right, so let's move to the last piece here in this section, Our Bodies and Time, and the last piece in this room. This is a light box by A.A. Brunson. And again, A.A. Brunson is one of the celebrities that we could convince to partake in our show, and I'm very happy that he agreed to be in it. AA and his partner Mark, they live in Germany. They moved to Berlin a couple of years ago. Originally, he's from Canada. He's lived in New York for many decades. And AA has been a very important figure in the art scene since the late 1960s, when he founded the collective General Idea in 1969, together with two friends. And General Idea became, in the 70s, mostly popular because of their conceptual art. In the course of the 80s, they also turned towards HIV and AIDS, and for example, there's this huge painting of the four letters AIDS. Okay, I think we're back. I'm just taking a break and having a zip. Sorry, we lost the connection here in the museum, but I think we can continue now. I was just talking about this piece by A.A. Brunson about his significance for 20th century art and for queer art, and talking about this site here, which is shown in the Lightbox picture, which is taken place on Fire Island, a gay and queer vacation spot close to New York City. And this spot here, particularly in the dunes, close to the forest, is a site where people would leave the ashes of their friends who died from AIDS, for example. And so AA and his partner are visiting the site. AA, next to his, say, political commitment to make art about AIDS, he's also very much interested in the dead. These are questions that come to mind with this beautiful piece by A.A. Brunson. And now we're moving on. I think we have our connection back, and we're moving on to our second room. And like the first one, this has two sections. It's a little bit smaller. Okay, so Dania gives me a sign that we are back. I'm sorry, we have a session which doesn't seem to be super stable here in this part of the building, but we are giving occasions to experience intimacy or also to experiment with intimacy. So the artworks that we see here are all artworks that, in my mind, have something to say about the intimacy in particular. This is a theme, by the way, which is also very much addressed by some queer theorists. You can think of Leo Bersani, Tim Dean, Michael Warner, Lauren Dolant. For all of them, the transformative aspect of specific New York. And he gives us this powerful, big, colorful painting of a rimming scene. And as I just already said, so I think, you know, for some queer people, this is really the potential of sex. You can see here the intensity of the feeling, of the experience, the celebration of it. And it gives us an idea of how, you know, not only sexual practices, but sexual rites, sexual fetishes can lead us to a new version, to a different version of ourselves. The second artist we have here in this room is Elijah Berger from the United States, who lives and works in Berlin. And you see his piece here lying on the floor, and that is how it's supposed to be. Sometimes he puts these on the wall or on the ceiling maybe, or on the floor like here. So we have these painted symbols. What are they? Are they letters? Are they abstract signs? And then you have colored photographs inserted into this, say, carpet. For Elijah, these are magic signs. He's interested in the mysticism of, say, an erotic alphabet or an alphabet of desire. And that is to say, he understands sexuality as highly ritualistic. And in these photographs, you can see him with his partner or with friends performing these rites in which these signs, these symbols, will be applied. We met Della Grace Volcano in the first room, and here with these three pictures you see scenes of FLTI sexual role play in different versions and articulations. I'm really interested in the question of BDSM, and this is, you know, obviously an abstract sculpture in the sense that it doesn't show a depiction, a representation of the human body, but what it does show and what it gives us is a sculpture that makes use of material that you would also use in BDSM sessions, for example, rope. So the question of power, the question of fetishism, the question of how to relate, how to create, intimacy through rituals and to negotiate power as a question of intimacy is also at stake with the photographs of the German Scandinavian couple, professional and private couple PP that lives here in Berlin. What we see is like gay scenes of enjoying the smell or the liquid of the body, you know, sweat, piss or sperm. And obviously the question of intimacy has also everything to do with the question of how do we relate to the body, to our body, to the other body, and to the let's just say here, the products of the body, and how to enjoy them. Another piece in the section of sex and power is this, and I hope you can see it. I think you can. It's presented on a tablet, and it's filmed through this eye, a domestic scene in a bedroom by Cibele Passarinho, who's a non-binary artist from Brazil living in Berlin. And this piece is called, interesting juxtaposition, hardcore cuddling. Yeah? So is this about tenderness, or is it about physical force, or is it about tenderness as physical force? This whole distinction is messed up here voluntarily, in a queer way, one might say, in the work of Cibele Passarinho. The next piece I want to present to you leads us again into a room. This is a video installation by the German performance and video artist Vika Kilchenbauer. I thought we might have sound here, but we don't have sound at the moment. But as you can perhaps already guess, without the sound, what this is about tickling. This is a performance about tickling. What is tickling? Is this a form of tenderness? Is this a form of infantile sexuality? Is this a form of repressed sexuality? Is this enjoyable or is this painful? So all these questions come up with, you know, the playful thing that's called tickling, although maybe not so playful, because this person here is also fixed to the mat, to a judo mat, and we in fact have these judo mats here lying on the floor in the room, and maybe post-corona we are all allowed to sit on these judo mats and feel inspired by the video and experiment with tickling as a form of intimacy. Okay, so we are approaching here already the last room of the exhibition. Here we have a beautiful little colored print by the Indian artist Tejal Shah. She produces these sometimes small size fantastic landscapes. Bodies and body parts come together in a composition of, one might say, undefined joy. Queer here is not just a question of gender and sexuality, but in a way reminiscent of feminist scholar Donna Haraway, as she asks the question about the border between the human and the animal, and the human and the machine. So it's queer in a much larger sense. So it's a small picture about a big queer utopia, and we will come back to the question of utopia in a second. But before that, we will have a look at these photographs of Irma Joanne from Rotterdam, who is working also in different media, performances, videos, or photographs, as here in this case. We do see different forms of the female body, sometimes wrapped in plastic foil, sometimes a plaster created after the form of the female body. Sometimes the layer or the cover seems like it's ripped off. So it reminds us of the limit of the body, the skin as the limit of the body, and the fragility of that limit that is, of course, at stake when we're talking about intimacy. And the next piece here to my right, by Bolivian-American artist Donna Juanca, who also lives in Berlin, is to me kind of echoes Irma Joanne's project. So we see here similar material, foils of plastic, there's a chain, there's maybe a wig. Some of these pieces are clothes. What is this? So is this some sort of abstract wardrobe? Is this a pile of secondhand clothes, clothes gave away. Is this trash? Where are the bodies that belong to these clothes? So the question of the protection of the body, what's left when the body is no longer there, these are questions that are here in this fascinating, colorful, catchy piece posed by Donna Juanca. And before we move to our very last section in the exhibition, we are having a look at the photographs of Florian Hetz. Florian Hetz is a German artist living and working in Berlin. We have here on the tablet a series of his pictures of many of the pictures by Florian classically, one might say, and in that seem a little bit reminiscent of the work of Robert Mapplethorpe from the 1980s. However, one might first say, this is an update of a project that is very much invested in forms, in the skin and surfaces for the Instagram generation, in the sense that these pictures want to get your attention, are catchy, because otherwise you click them away immediately, like on Instagram. But, and here's the but, Florian's pictures are not, say, smooth surfaces. They're not like easily to be consumed, but they always have some sort of, let's just say, irritation or even distortion. That can be hair or liquid or a scar, for example. So that would be the project, a scar, for example, as a mastectomy. This is the project of Florian to give us these beautiful pictures of bodies, forms of the body, the surface of the body, but to remind us at the same time of the vulnerability or mortality. Intimacy, nuclear art from Berlin and beyond. This section is called More Parties for Us. COVID-19 has many consequences for all of us, but also specific consequences for queer people and queer life, since many of us don't live. Family, public space and nightlife have a particular significance for our ways of being together. Many are concerned that the amazing queer nightlife of Berlin with its bars, clubs, backrooms and festivals will not come back. The queer infrastructure of Berlin is massively suffering from the economic hardship they have to endure during Corona times, and not all of them will survive this. We have to support them, and we will have to fight to re-establishing them. And the pictures you just saw were by the German painter Kerstin Drechsel, who lives and works in Berlin. She's also a professor of art in Braunschweig. You might know that space in Neukölln-Kreuzberg called Ficken 3000 that has a back room in the basement. It's a basement that is gay men, though not exclusively. This is a project where Kerstin invited a couple of friends to the space of Ficken 3000 and to appropriate this usually gay public sex space from a lesbian perspective, and to give us these exciting pictures of lesbian public sex in couples or with three, with a sling, on the chair, in the basement, in the darkroom. Okay, we already saw Spiros's picture in the first room. We have a couple of more here, and if we move around the corner, there's another piece by Sholem Kristaika. Again, these are scenes from Berlin's queer nightlife. They show us certain forms of connecting that are, one might say, only possible in the dark, at night. And if we turn around to the wall, we see here three large photographs, and some of you might recognize this site. This is the Griesmühle in Berlin, the location of the legendary Cocktail d'Amore party, which closed down beginning of 2020, actually not because of Corona, but because of real estate development and gentrification in the city. And it reminds us of the often precarious condition under which queer communities come into being and are depending on economic dynamics. So this is the outside of Griesmühle, Cocktail d'Amore. Cocktail d'Amore will actually reopen in a different location later in the year, and here on the right side, this gives us the outside of Griesmühle, Cocktail d'Amore, and this gives us the inside. We have seen many visual representations of intimacy, but I said initially, intimacy is also the form of words, like for example in poetry. And you cannot hear this now, unfortunately. I can only point it out here to the audio files on the wall. What you will be able to hear when you put on the headphones is the poetry of George Lenon's, poet George Lenon's. And in his texts, he talks about encounters between younger gay men and old nature of intimacy. And so this can be experienced, one might say, once we open again and we can give you the headphones in a very intimate moment by listening to these poems. Our last picture. This is a photograph by Victor Luc. Victor Luc is from Spain, but also lives and works in Berlin. And like Rafael Medina and Spyros Rent and Sholem Kristaika, I think it's fair to say he's one of the people documenting queer nightlife in Berlin, but also participating in it, looking at it from both positions. And this is a picture which is taken during Wollt Festival. Wollt Festival is a music festival, a dance festival, a club festival that takes place once a year in Brandenburg, so at the outskirts of Berlin. And again, you might think that this is like the pictures from Griesmühle, the morning after the party, and one of going for a swim in one of the many lakes that are surrounding Berlin. Victor gives us an image for future or more queer parties, of the queer future and for more queer parties to come. All right, so this was a bit of a tour de force, to be honest, for me. I had to talk a lot. I got a few breaks because of the technical problems, fortunately. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you... Also for us, this is a difficult time. You know, we are counting on ticket sales that we didn't have last year, that we don't have at the moment. If you like our work, if you want to support our work, you can go to our website and make a donation. You can also become a member of Schwules Museum, so any support is certainly highly appreciated. We hope to see you back here soon, in a couple of weeks, couple of months. Definitely, I'm daring to say in the summer, so that you'd still have a chance to look at these beautiful artworks in person.